And we're back with some breaking news. In the 2024 lead, President Biden just sat down for his very first interview since officially dropping out of the presidential race. Take a listen to part of that.
Are you confident that there will be a peaceful transfer of power in January 2025?
If Trump wins, no, I'm not confident at all. I mean, if Trump loses, I'm not confident at all. He means what he says. We don't take him seriously. He means it. All the stuff about if we lose, there'll be a bloodbath. It's have to be a stolen election. Look what they're trying to do now in the local election districts where people count the votes. They're putting people in place in states that they're going to count the votes, right? You can't love your country only when you win.
Panel's here with me. Just one little fact check. What Trump said was if he loses, there would be an economic bloodbath. Not exactly. I mean, everything else he said is accurate. But John, let me ask you, what do you think? I mean, I can understand, obviously President Biden is biased, but I can understand why an average voter out there might say, well, I'm not confident that it will be peaceful either if Trump loses.
So voter integrity has been an issue for a number of elections, despite Trump. I mean, you can go back to the George W. Bush election. People had real concerns with the integrity of an election. And I think that since we've changed the way that we vote with these mail-in ballots, that's opened up some real issues. So I do think that federally we kind of need to look at a better way of kind of protecting voter integrity so that we can shore up people's confidence into the elections.
Karen?
Yeah, I think the majority of Americans are confident in the election, but when you have someone running for president who continues to run on the lie that there was something wrong with the 2020 election, then yes.
Not just there's something wrong, he said it was stolen.
It was stolen, correct.
Which is not true.
It was absolutely not true. And when you have someone and his party perpetuating that lie, I think President Biden is exactly right. I think it makes Americans very concerned about how Trump will behave.
Sure, let's move on to a different topic. It's only been 17 days since Biden dropped out of the race. Today marks 90 days left until the election. We've seen a lot of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in the last day or so, as well as Trump's running mate, Senator J.D. Vance. Trump does not have a public event on his calendar until Friday evening. I just have to say, as somebody who's covered him since 2015, I thought we'd be seeing him having a rally a day every day from now until the election. Are you surprised?
I definitely am surprised, Jake. Just his history. He loves doing events. He loves being out there in the public. He loves doing rallies. And the fact that he isn't is really surprising to me. We saw him Saturday in Atlanta, but he's letting Vance do a lot of the campaigning, which I think we should all be paying more attention to. Why is Vance doing more of the campaigning? Is it because he thinks Vance can speak better to the American voters that he wants to bring into the Republican Party? Or is it for some other reason?
Well, what do you think?
Well, one, we have to remind ourselves that the current president was forced out of his presidency by party leaders, and they have some catching up to do in many of these swing states because many people don't know what these tickets are. President Trump has been doing rallies all year, and now we're talking about the number of people showing up at Democratic rallies, but we wasn't much covering the rallies that he did in blue states like New Jersey and rallies that he's done in Brooklyn, New York. Which was real news.
We covered them. We covered them.
But,
we covered them.
Yeah, and look, the crowd sizes were not that big. They were not
Not that big for Democrats, you're saying?
No, I'm saying for Trump, they
Trump.
were not as big as we saw in 2016. We're not seeing, and he has had a fairly light schedule throughout this cycle. And I think it does, particularly now that President Biden, who stepped out of the race and Kamala Harris earned the nomination, now we can actually take a look at Trump, and I think his age actually becomes more apparent, and I think questions about he's going to face more pressure with a young running mate. Is it that the young running mate is the one who can handle the travel? Is it that Trump can't handle that kind of travel given his age? I mean, I do think, we were asking those questions about Joe Biden with him out of the race. They are very fair to ask about Donald Trump.
So, Jordan, I want to ask you, because the Washington Post got hold of some of J.D. Vance's private text messages with right-wing conspiracy theorist Charles Johnson. They corresponded for more than 20 months after he was elected to the Senate, J.D. Vance. They reportedly discussed everything from America's foreign alliances to pondering the responsibility of the Nord Stream gas pipelines, Vance's aversion to the Ukrainian government. According to the report, Vance, quote, also wrote a positive blurb for a book by somebody who's a far-right activist who advanced the Pizzagate conspiracy theory. So the Post reports, quote, in response to questions about his correspondence with Charles Johnson, Vance spokesman William Martin said the two men were never close, don't share the same politics. Chuck Johnson spam texted J.D. Vance. J.D. usually ignored him, but occasionally responded to pushback against things he said. But why is J.D. Vance corresponding with a Holocaust-denying racist? I mean, I don't think that that's what J.D. Vance is, but why even engage with a fellow like that?
So I don't have any background
Yeah.
on that correspondence, but what I could tell you is that what we're not talking about is how Harris hasn't done an interview in 17 days. We're not talking about the policy issues. I mean, here we got a person that's
Just so
running
you
for
know, I
president.
did ask Governor Westmore earlier in the show, shouldn't Kamala Harris do an interview? And of course, I think she should do an interview.
Yeah, I mean, it's only 17 days in, and she hasn't really spoken without a script in front of her. And she's an unelected candidate for president.
Well, she was elected to
Yeah, she
vice
was
president.
elected.
But
Unelected ticket is what I'm saying.
let's go to
during
let's
the
go to his
primaries.
larger point, though. Shouldn't she be doing? Isn't it time for her to be doing interviews, taking press questions, et cetera?
Sure.
Because she's modifying. That's a nice word for it. For some of her previous positions, like on fracking and the like. You're a journalist. Wouldn't you like to ask her some questions?
I work for a hometown newspaper. I've put in the request. I was looking back at the last real big interview she did was Rolling Stone in April or June. I think she needs to do more of it. The press got a lot more daily interactions with President Biden when he's going to and from Marine One, things like that. She needs to do more of that. She's done it a little bit, but we absolutely need to hear from her
I think
more.
you will see her do an interview, but again, it's been 17 days. She did have to spend a lot of time to earn the nomination in that time to then pick a vice president. And I do think you'll see her do a sit-down interview soon, as a matter of fact. But again, she did have a few things to do in the last few days.
I hope it's not to talk show or late night news that we've been seeing a lot from this administration. I hope it's with a real newspaper or television reporter.
Perhaps the hometown newspaper.
Maybe.
Perhaps. Thanks, one and all. Appreciate it.